Western governments and human rights organizations have widely condemned the sentencing of Kremlin critic Vladimir Kara-Murza to 25 years in a Russian labor camp. A Moscow court convicted the prominent Russian journalist and political activist of treason and spreading disinformation about the Russian military. Kara-Murza had denied the charges. The U.S. ambassador to Russia said the sentence was a sign of Moscow's weakness, not strength, and was clearly an attempt to silence dissent. Kara-Murza's lawyer told DW that in light of her client's poor health, the jail term amounted to a death sentence.
A so-called strict regime labor camp in Russia. It's the kind of prison in which Vladimir Kara-Murza may now spend the next 25 years of his life. The dual Russian and British citizen is one of Russia's last prominent opposition figures. He's been behind bars since April 2022. Russian authorities arrested Kara-Murza after he denounced Russia's so-called special military operation in Ukraine during a speech to American politicians. He was first charged with spreading false information about the Russian military. Then Russian prosecutors added a charge of treason. The son of a Soviet-era journalist, Kara-Murza has worked as a journalist and political activist since he was 16. He served as part of the coordinating council of the Russian opposition and the NGO Open Russia. He was also widely seen as a protege of murdered opposition leader Boris Nemtsov, who was gunned down near the Kremlin in 2015. Kara-Murza also alleges he was the target of political violence, twice narrowly surviving what doctors described as intentional poisonings. Long an outspoken critic of Vladimir Putin, Kara-Murza remained defiant during his trial, saying he's proud of his statements and looks forward to the day when the people who unleashed Russia's invasion of Ukraine are recognized as criminals.
And we're joined now by a former colleague and a friend of Vladimir Kara-Murza. Bill Browder was the largest foreign investor in Russia until he was declared a threat to national security for exposing corruption in Russian state-owned companies. His efforts have led to the passing of the Magnitsky Act, which sanctions human rights abusers and corrupt officials. Thanks for joining us. Bill, your friend and former colleague has been sentenced to 25 years in prison. Share with us your thoughts on this day.
Well, my main thought is just absolute horror. Vladimir is a guy who is in ill health at the moment because they tried to poison him twice. He's losing the sensation in both of his feet because of the nerve damage that those poisonings did, and he can barely walk now. He's lost about 20 kilos. And as his lawyer said, this is not a life sentence. This is a death sentence. They will basically kill him in prison if he has to carry on with this sentence. And so I'm crying on the inside right now for my friend and my colleague because what they're doing to him is just truly inhumane.
Kara-Murza holds both Russian and British passports. Has the British government, Bill, done all it can to help him?
The answer is no. So the first thing that we did, myself and his wife Yevgenia, after he was arrested, was we went to different countries that had passed the Magnitsky Act. The Magnitsky Act freezes the assets and bans the visas of human rights violators. And Vladimir was absolutely essential in getting this law passed. And we went to them and said, you need to sanction the perpetrators who have put him in, his persecutors, essentially. And Canada sanctioned them, the United States sanctioned them, but Britain, where he has got citizenship, has not sanctioned them. And so Britain is effectively doing nothing for their own citizen, while other countries where he doesn't have any connection are doing all sorts of things. And so it's quite remarkable how passive the British government has been in the Kara-Murza case so far.
This verdict sends a terrifying message to those who oppose the government's policies in Russia, especially those who oppose the war. Will anyone there dare to speak out against Putin after this?
Well, I think that's one of the purposes of having such a crazy and exaggerated jail sentence is not just to punish Vladimir, who is certainly an enemy of the regime, but it's to send a message to everybody else who might be thinking about standing up to Putin, might be thinking about standing up against the war, that look, you're going to get either a life sentence or a death sentence if you do. And so very few people are so brave as to take that risk, to make that sacrifice. And so I think that Putin has probably achieved one of his big aims, which is to effectively terrorize his own citizens.
I've got a quote here I'd like to share with our viewers. These are remarks that Vladimir Kara-Murza made at the closing session of his trial in Moscow. He told the judge that, quote, "The day will come when the darkness over our country will dissipate, when a war will be called a war and a usurper, and when those who kindled and unleashed this war, rather than those who tried to stop it, will be recognized as criminals." Bill Browder, do you share your friend's faith in Russia's future?
Well, in any kind of partnership, there are the the people seeing the glass half full and the glass half empty. I'm more of a pessimist, and I do hope that one day Russia will be a better place. But it's hard for me to see anything good when Vladimir has basically been locked up for the rest of his life for the simple crime of protesting the war and calling Putin a human rights violator. It's very hard for me to have any optimism about anything right now.
As you mentioned, sanctions were imposed upon Russia for different reasons. Those sanctions have been tightened since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia. What do you suggest, Bill, that could be done to help people like your friend who's now facing 25 years in jail?
Well, so far, some countries haven't sanctioned the individuals involved in Vladimir's persecution. Those countries should. And when I say those countries, I mean the EU has not sanctioned his persecutors. The EU should. Britain should. Australia should. I think every single person, every judge who was involved in there are 3 judges, every judge involved in this, every prosecutor, every policeman involved in this trumped up case should find themselves, their names permanently indelibly on a list, so that when the Putin regime falls, they can't travel anywhere, that they can't keep their assets in the West. And we should make an example out of them in the same way as they're making an example out of Vladimir. It should go both ways.